So, a lot of people have been asking my opinion about Owen Benjamin because we cover some similar topics. Now, there's other things that he talks about that aren't at all what I talk about on this channel, certain things. But a lot of people have been asking, what's your opinion on Owen Benjamin? And I'll give you a future video where I talk about this guy. But in the meantime, I just want to talk about something that I heard him talking about the other day. I just heard him do a stream, and I don't tune into all of his streams. I'm busy, and he usually streams at a time when I'm sleeping. But I watch some of his streams when I'm around and he's live, and I watch some of the highlights, some of the highlight channels, the clips, and I just heard him do this stream yesterday, or this morning for me anyways, about super soldiers, and he talked a lot about autism, and like most people, autism is not something that I've really put a lot of thought into, and that's not the kind of thing I cover on this channel, but he was talking about autism, and he said all these things, and I just kind of thought, that's interesting. But he also talked about super soldiers and the traits that they want for super soldiers, and he said basically these are traits of autism or Asperger's. So there was that thing about how they want us to be autistic, but even their super soldiers, they want them to be autistic and at least have those traits. So I just watched it and I thought, well, that was really interesting. I don't know if he's wrong or right about this stuff, but it was interesting and it's not something I've thought about before. So then later on, I went about my day and I kind of forgot about it. But a movie came on when I was taking care of my son, and the movie is The Predator. Now, first of all, this is a really bad, really cheesy movie, actually. Now, I watched a movie last week that came on HBO, Benchwarmers 2, which is a straight-to-video sequel of a Rob Schneider movie that's not even that well known or particularly well liked. So if a movie like Benchwarmers 2 is bad and cheesy, no one really cares. It's not letting anyone down. There was no expectations of what a direct-to-video sequel to Benchwarmers should be. But with a film like The Predator, of course that's a long franchise. The first one is considered a classic. The other ones, I think I've only seen one other one in the franchise, and I don't really care. I like the first one, that's the classic. The other ones, most of them I didn't see, I don't care. But this was on TV when I happened to be taking care of my son, so we sat down and we watched it as we fed our son and such. And this movie, it has all the usual agenda, all the usual tropes, all the usual silliness and unbelievability. If you start with the scientists, of course, the scientists look exactly what you would expect them to look like. The one is African American and the other is a female. And this female, not only is she one of the world's most brilliant scientists, she's also a kick-butt warrior. Of course, that's what she ends up being, a fearless, tough chick. So you have that, and then they get to the other parts where, like, he meets this other guy on a bus full of crazy people. These are ex-soldiers that are now, they kind of have to seek psychiatric treatment because the main character's on the bus, and he immediately befriends a black guy, the Hollywood black best friend. So he has no trust in the military, this soldier, but he meets this black guy, and immediately he starts trusting this guy within minutes. And then they go on the mission to catch the Predator. But there's so much things that they just don't feel right. At least, even if you know nothing about that, they're trying to push an agenda. If you're totally blue-pilled and you don't get that aspect of it, subconsciously you say, boy, this is really hokey stuff. It seems so unbelievable, all the premises for this movie. And then by the time they get to the point where they talk about climate change, there's a point where they state that climate change is going to kill everyone within 2 generations, possibly 1 generation. Well, I've got a baby son, and I'm sure a lot of other people out there have babies, and some people, if they really buy into this, which probably no one does because it's such a hokey, silly movie by this point, I could see how that would really freak people out. Oh my God, my child's gonna die because of climate change. Well, like I said, by this point, you don't really believe anything from the movie, but maybe if it was a better done movie, maybe you would actually buy into this, and you hear about all these stories like people in Scandinavia, half of people there are scared to have children because they worry about climate change, or they have guilt about flying on an airplane because of climate change. Now, first of all, I'm not worried about it because I don't believe climate change is going to wipe us out within a generation or two. If I believe that, it'd be like, well, what's the point of making a baby? And I'm planning on making more. But second of all, I also don't worry about it because, look, my son is going to die anyways. I don't know when, I don't know what of, but that's a fact. That's something we can't deny. And third of all, when he does die, I believe he's going to go to heaven. So, as someone of faith, I believe that he's going to go to heaven, and when we die, there's nothing we can take from this world with us to the next world, to the afterlife, except for one thing, and that's children. That's the one thing that you can take from this world to heaven with us, is our children. So I'm not worried about that. And it's interesting too how it's all the godless people that are pushing going against nature, whether it's the gender swap thing or the transhuman movement, where they are trying to make themselves live forever through technology, whether that means becoming something like a cyborg with machine body parts, or uploading their minds, their brains, their consciousness to a computer program. But it's all the godless people that are trying to go against it. And I'm an environmentalist myself. I wasn't trying to mock environmental issues. I'm a big-time environmentalist myself. But whether climate change is real or not, or whether humans affect it, or we can do anything about it, the one thing that we can all admit is a problem is pollution is a problem, and that's something we should deal with. And I'm an environmentalist like that. I don't get into some of these extreme ideologies, because if you notice the people pushing them, the people that are pushing climate change the most, and these scare tactics, if you look at their behavior, you'd say, my goodness, they obviously don't believe in it themselves. Just like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's from the first Predator movie, he's a big advocate for climate change. Well, what was this guy's behavior? When this guy was the governor of California, he was named the biggest polluter out of any private citizen in the entire state, because he would fly on a private jet every single day from Los Angeles to Sacramento and back. So he's flying on his private jet every day, and now he's trying to be like, well, I have a Hummer that runs on electricity, so see, I'm not polluting the environment. It's like, well, what about all the years that you were flying on a private jet on a daily basis? So anyways, getting back to the point about the autistic super soldiers, the main character's son in this movie, he's autistic. And he's a major part of the movie, and you see it all come together at the end of the movie. At the end, the Predator, he announces he's gonna hunt and kill everyone, but there's one that he wanted, and he wanted, I think the main character, I think his name was McKenna, he announced there's one great warrior amongst the group, and that's McKenna, and he's gonna take him last. So you're led to believe he's gonna go after the main hero of the movie, but when it comes down to it at the end, what does he do? He grabs the son, and he grabs the son to take back with him, and they realize, wait, that's who he actually wanted, because he's the next step in evolution. The dad is a great warrior, but the more evolved warrior of the future is going to be his autistic son. So it amazed me, because everything Owen actually talked about, even though some of it might sound a little crazy, everything he talked about, that was the exact plot of this movie. That's exactly what happened in the movie, that his autistic son is going to be this more evolved super soldier, this super warrior. But the movie was so bad, so cheesy. They even stole elements of the plot from the movie I Come in Peace, if you remember that movie, which is kind of a cult classic at this time. But it's so hard to watch some movies these days, because there's always an agenda being pushed on you. Now, thankfully, a movie like this that's heavily pushing these agendas and these things that they want us to believe, like with these women are great scientists as well as kick-butt warriors. In a movie that's so poorly done like this, I don't think it really works, their propaganda. But thankfully, It's rare, but there are some movies that don't push the agenda. Recently, I mentioned in one of the best movies I've seen in a long time, the movie Glass, which I watched the movie Glass on TV and I thought, wow, this is a great movie. And it's a dark, very thrilling movie, but it's actually a pretty clean movie at the same time. So they showed that you can make a very serious, very dark, thrilling movie, but also have it still be wholesome and clean. And the movie had no agenda. They weren't trying to push any kind of anything of the, well, you know what I'm talking about, the agenda. I don't want to say everything, but the only message that this movie Glass had in it at the end was actually a very positive message, and I was blown away by this movie. I'm like, wow, this is the best movie I've seen in a long time. So I looked up the reviews to see what other people were saying, and all the critics hated this movie. It was not a well-received movie by the critics, even though the fans, the moviegoers themselves, actually loved the movie. But that movie didn't have the agenda in it. And I just saw a movie the other night, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and this movie, it has good stuff, it has bad stuff. The first hour is actually pretty boring. Not to use that overused meme that I just talked about in the last video, but this is about the most boomer movie that you will see, meaning that a lot of it relies on nostalgia, and boomers that are like 70 years old now going like, oh yeah, I remember when things were like that. They're kind of banking on a lot of that for the movie. And the first hour of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's so slow. But it does get a little bit better after that. And I don't like Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor, but I have to say he did an excellent job in the movie. And going towards the movie, almost to the end, you're thinking, geez, it doesn't feel like this is actually a Tarantino movie, whose movies I don't like other than Pulp Fiction. I think that's his only good movie he's ever made. But it feels like getting towards the end, it's like, is this even a Tarantino movie? There's no violence in this movie. And then finally, towards the end, there is some. But what's interesting about the movie, too, is there's some graphic scenes with some women being beat up really bad in a really graphic ways. This is more at the end of the movie, and I don't want to give away the whole movie. But I'm surprised that that the liberals aren't extremely angry about showing this in the movie. And I think that they get away with it for two reasons. One is Tarantino's a very popular, very acclaimed director, of course, and especially the Hollywood people, they love anything he does. I dislike his movies for the most part, except for that one movie. But also, these are real-life characters that they're having fictional portrayals of. And these women that are getting beaten up really bad, these are really evil, despicable people. So, the violence it's also not very low vibrational because, like I said, these are really despicable characters. It's kind of cathartic in a way because it's people doing what needs to be done, doing what should be done. But the movie didn't have any agenda, partly because it takes place in the past when America was a very different place, and the movie's kind of about that, the theme of the movie. And it's only white, as far as I remember, it's only white actors in this movie, except for Bruce Lee. And they portrayed Bruce Lee. I'm a big Bruce Lee fan, but they portrayed Bruce Lee in a way that just made him look like a total clown. And I see why his daughter's very upset because, like, if you know nothing about Bruce Lee, just seeing the way he's portrayed in this movie, you'd think he's a total idiot because he's portrayed as an idiot. So I didn't like that aspect because I am a Bruce Lee fan. But the movie, amazingly, didn't really have any agenda, and I think that's because Tarantino has more control over his movies. So he's respected to the level where they'll just say they love anything he does. So that movie, it was okay. It had good parts. It had bad parts. The movie Glass is a great movie, but that movie, The Predator, it's an entertaining movie, but it's an incredibly stupid movie. And I just wanted to share these thoughts about how it was quite interesting what Owen was saying. It was exactly played out in this movie, The Predator. But I'll probably do a video about him in the future because so many people ask questions like what's my opinion of him and stuff. So stay tuned for that and be sure to check out my other videos.